Good evening from Westminster, where it's been a night of chaos and a lot of confusion in the Brexit process, with just 16 days to the set date for Britain's departure from the EU. In a series of votes tonight, MPs rejected any prospect of a no-deal Brexit. And those votes involved several ministers refusing to obey Theresa May's instructions, and their future in government is now in doubt. The votes are not legally binding, but MPs will now get a vote tomorrow on delaying the Brexit process, although that would depend on the EU's approval. The Prime Minister warned the House of Commons that a delay was not likely to be approved unless MPs backed the deal very soon. We start tonight with our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, on tonight's momentous votes.
There really was something worth watching for the small crowd outside the Commons tonight. A vote, a result, the Prime Minister never wanted.
No, it's a no to no deal.
The country voted to leave, end of.
Stupid, you're just giving away your bargaining chips.
A little bit squeaky bum time.
The ayes to the right, 321. The noes to the left, 278.
Parliament won, the Prime Minister lost. MPs clearly said we should never leave the EU without a deal. But what now?
The House has today provided a clear majority against leaving without a deal. However, I will repeat what I have said before.
Can she really say nothing has changed?
The legal default in UK and EU law remains that the UK will leave the EU without a deal unless something else is agreed.
Struggling to be heard, not just because of her failing voice.
The House has to understand and accept that if it is not willing to support a deal in the coming days, and as it is not willing to support leaving without a deal on the 29th of March, then it is suggesting that there will need to be a much longer extension to Article 50. The House needs to face up to the consequences of the decisions it has taken.
Through the noise, understand, the Prime Minister's not ditching her deal. Instead, she's warning MPs, vote for it soon, or else Brexit faces a long delay.
In the last 24 hours, Parliament has decisively rejected both her deal and no deal. While an extension of Article 50 is now inevitable, the responsibility for that extension lies solely and squarely at the Prime Minister's door. Parliament must now take control of the situation. Let us, as a House of Commons, work now to find a solution to deal with the crisis facing this country and the deep concerns that many people have. It's up to us, as the House of Commons, to look for and find a solution to their concerns. That is what we were elected to do.
The astonishing thing about tonight's defeat for Number 10, it only happened because some ministers who sat around the same table in there this morning ignored the Prime Minister's instructions and abstained. A total breakdown in discipline.
I'm not resigning because I support the Prime Minister in her course of action. Her course of action is to leave with a deal in an orderly Brexit. But I'm very clear that I don't support a no-deal Brexit, and I've made that clear on numerous occasions.
He looks strained because this is not, repeat, just not normal. There's already an angry pushback against ministers who didn't vote with the government, even though their allies insist they were told they could.
Any minister who has defied the whip should consider their position and resign from government.
A junior minister quit the front bench to vote against the party line. Within days, Theresa May will ask MPs to choose her deal or delay. But could tonight's fiasco be for nothing?
I'll tell the government now that when meaningful vote 3 comes back, I will see to it that we honour what we owe to them to keep voting this down, however many times it's brought back, whatever pressure we're put under, and come what may, please don't do it. Go back to the EU and say it won't pass.
But for some time, ministers have privately hoped the threat of slamming the brakes on Brexit could push and shove Parliament towards backing a deal they hate.
Parliament has done this to us. The weakness, frankly, of certain ministers has done this to us. The weakness of the Labour Party has done this to us. And I tonight am angry and bewildered at having a gun to my head to vote for a wretched deal or not to leave.
Number 10 believes the EU when they say The deal as it stands really is it.
Nous avons négocié pendant 1 an et demi avec le gouvernement de Theresa May.
The chief negotiator brandishing the treaty today, what he said is the only one. Within a few days, that deal, the Prime Minister's deal, will be back in front of Parliament for another verdict. Theresa May pursuing a strategy by bizarre design or political accident. Losing, then losing, and losing again, with the hope, finally, to win.
And here outside the Palace of Westminster, Laura is with me. Laura, we now have a Brexit process in chaos. And as you said in your report, we have a government where discipline has broken down.
Oh, completely. And in the words of one cabinet source, there's been absolute pandemonium tonight. No question about that. Cabinet ministers ignoring the instructions of the party line, abstaining instead of voting with Theresa May to try to prevent Parliament ruling out the idea of us ever leaving the European Union without a formal arrangement in place. It has been a totally extraordinary night, but there are some very clear results out of it that I think we should underline. First off, Parliament has made it clear, only just, but clear, that they would not allow the UK to leave the European Union after decades and decades without there being a formal arrangement in place. They haven't changed the law. It still could happen as far as the legal default is concerned, but that is what Parliament's will is. The second thing, though, the Prime Minister is now overtly warning her MPs, you vote for my deal or Brexit will be delayed for a long time. And she's also suggesting tonight MPs will vote again on her deal that has been defeated so heavily twice within a few days.
Which brings me, Laura, to the wording of this motion in the Prime Minister's name tomorrow. The wording is notable, and that clearly puts a lot more pressure on MPs.
It does, absolutely. The government's motion tomorrow says, even if her deal goes through, Brexit is going to have to be extended until the end of June in order to give them time to tidy up the legislation if Theresa May's dream of actually passing the thing comes true. But that date alone does not really give us a guide to what happens next, because as she said, if it's voted down, well then clearly a longer delay is something that might be on the stocks. So tomorrow, Parliament has an opportunity to say, look, let's slam the brakes on this whole thing. But she well knows that there are Brexiteers on the backbenches, Brexiteers in government too, who may think again about scaring away from her deal if it means somehow that this whole process could be really dramatically slowed down.
Laura, we'll talk again later. Thank you very much. Laura Kingsburg there for us. What we'll do now is go to Brussels tonight and get the perspective there from our Europe editor, Katja Adler. So after today's turbulent events at Westminster, Katja, what is the perspective there in the European Union?
Well, I think if you have a look at European Union leaders tonight, their mood is a heady mixture of confused, bemused, irritated, frustrated. I mean, I keep getting phone calls and texts, Hugh, from my European contacts asking me what's going on in the UK and if I can predict for them what is going to happen. Of course, I'm not quite able to do that. As for tonight's vote, certainly European Union leaders can see that what happened was phenomenally important politically, but that alone doesn't stop the clock. The EU says just voting against a no-deal Brexit doesn't stop it from happening. MPs uniting around a deal, Theresa May's deal, or some other realistic option, that is the way to stop a no-deal Brexit. So for now, the EU has decided to take a big step backwards. The European Commission says their job is done. They were tasked by EU leaders to negotiate an exit deal with Theresa May, and they did that. Now they say it's up to Parliament to decide what exactly next. After tonight's vote, the Commission said, look, there are two ways to leave the EU, with a deal or without a deal, and the EU is prepared for both options. So which way is the UK going to jump? And by the way, says the EU, just asking to delay Brexit doesn't put off a no-deal Brexit either. But I think, Hugh, that you and I will probably be discussing extensions tomorrow.
Katja, we'll talk tomorrow, as you say. Thank you very much. Katja Adler, there, our Europe editor in Brussels. Here at Westminster, Laura is back with me. Laura, the Chancellor there spoke about the cloud of uncertainty hanging over the economy. Now, given what's happened today, what do you think are the chances of the Prime Minister coming back next week with this deal and possibly edging towards victory on it?
Well, out of complete chaos at Westminster tonight, I mean, it has been a complete mess and a very bad night for the government. There is, though, a faint possibility that by ending up in a situation where the Prime Minister will now ask MPs to say, look, it's either a long delay or my deal, that could focus some Brexiteer minds and start to move more of them and the Northern Irish Unionist DUP, whose votes she desperately needs, towards backing her deal. But that's absolutely not in the bag. There are a million different reasons why that might not happen, including what the European Union says when she actually goes out there to Brussels next week after the vote. So it's possible that this disaster tonight makes it easier for her. But there's a really pertinent question: at what cost? Because tonight we have seen one of the traditional rules of Parliament and politics not just be torn up, but being completely thrown out of the window. That if you're in the cabinet, you have to vote the same way as the Prime Minister. That is gone now. Discipline in this government has gone now. And one very senior Tory has just said to me, this government is breaking down. So look, it may well be that in the next couple of weeks, Theresa May does in the end manage to get this deal through by the skin of her teeth. But beyond that, can she really still be at the top of a functioning government in future? That is an open question, and there's plenty of her critics ready to answer it in the negative.
Laura, once again, thanks very much. Laura Coons.
Good evening. Even in a week of drama, the events here in Westminster tonight have been really quite something. The government had offered the House of Commons a vote to take no deal off the table for the time being. MPs amended it to take no deal off the table forever, causing an immediate and frankly unprecedented panic as Tory whips tried to force their own MPs to vote against the government's own motion. Some cabinet ministers abstained, suggesting a collapse in party discipline. One junior minister, Sarah Newton, resigned. Chaos is really too polite a word for it. The big question, though, is what does it all mean? Well, the Prime Minister was really quite clear on that at the dispatch box. Either MPs pass her deal in the next 16 days, or she will seek a long extension to Article 50 from the European Union, thought to mean a year or more. So Brexit's leaders now do really have a choice: fall into line before the 29th of March, or possibly lose the kind of Brexit they dream of forever.
There have been moments of high drama in the House of Commons over the past few months, but nothing like this.
The ayes to the right, 312. The noes to the left, 308.
That was the sound of Parliament voting to veto a no-deal Brexit, not just this month as the government wanted, but for all time.
So the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
Throwing the government's strategy into complete and total disarray. Extraordinary scenes, though. This is the government in complete chaos, isn't it?
Well, it's utterly bizarre. I've never seen anything like that at all. The government bizarrely whipped against its own bill. So you have the government saying, here is our motion, and then saying, no, here is our motion, but don't vote for it. So that caused a lot of confusion in the chamber.
In this shot on the government front bench, the chief whip can be seen conferring with ministers about how to avoid a defeat on the main no-deal vote. The Chancellor, Philip Hammond, to the left of the Speaker here, who just hours before warned about the dangers of no deal, looked deeply pensive, as Tory MPs were told there'd be an about turn and they'd now be expected to vote against the government's own motion. Ministers disobeyed in significant numbers, a second defeat for a shell-shocked Prime Minister.
The House has today provided a clear majority against leaving without a deal. However, I will repeat what I have said before.
Who warned a long delay to Brexit was now likely.
The House has to understand and accept that if it is not willing to support a deal in the coming days, and as it is not willing to support leaving without a deal on the 29th of March, then it is suggesting that there will need to be a much longer extension to Article 50.
Mr. Speaker, tonight this House has once again definitely ruled out no deal. The Prime Minister said the choice was between her deal and no deal. In the last 24 hours, Parliament has decisively rejected both her deal and no deal. While an extension of Article 50 is now inevitable, the responsibility for that extension lies solely and squarely at the Prime Minister's door.
Tonight, one minister resigned after voting to rule out no deal, Junior Minister Sarah Newton, while 12 other ministers abstained, including from the Cabinet, Work and Pensions Secretary Amber Rudd, Justice Secretary David Gauke, Business Secretary Greg Clark and the Scottish Secretary David Mundell.
I'm not resigning because I support the Prime Minister in her course of action. Her course of action is to leave with a deal in an orderly Brexit. But I'm very clear that I don't support a no-deal Brexit.
Brexiters were trying to put a brave face on it.
It doesn't really change anything. The statute law is that we leave on the 29th of March, and the Prime Minister is very clear that unless the statute is changed, that is what happens with or without a deal.
The Prime Minister returned to Downing Street, humiliation heaped on humiliation. She's lost control of her party and her Brexit strategy, and yet incredibly seems determined to plough on. Romilly Weeks, News at 10, Westminster.
Government ministers abstaining on the government's own motion. That really is something to see. So I think it is fair tonight to say that we have a government in desperate search of a policy on the defining issue of the day. It's not where it, or any of the rest of us for that matter, wanted to be after almost 3 years. But never mind. MPs may indeed be panicked into backing her deal, but if not, what does happen after that? We asked Paul Brand to reach for his crystal ball.
Tonight, these protesters haven't quite stopped Brexit, but relief that MPs have rejected a certain kind of it.
I'm just elated. I've never, ever felt so relieved about anything in my life. This is just what we needed.
But while they're flying high, tonight the government's plunged to new lows. MPs defying the Prime Minister to seize all control.
Not only do we have a government in complete crisis, but we also have a Prime Minister who absolutely refuses to listen to Parliament and makes promises at the dispatch box, which she then appears to break.
And tonight, the Prime Minister's club of loyal ministers becomes ever more exclusive.
Some people have very deeply held opinions. You've seen that tonight, but the government is united.
No,
around...
it's not. It's absolutely not united tonight.
United
it's desperate measures when government ministers are abstaining on the government's own motion.
Well, the government voted this evening to keep no deal on the table, and the Prime Minister said very swiftly thereafter that tomorrow we're going to have important votes in the House on whether we should extend the Article 50 process.
Tonight, the government published the details of that vote, and tomorrow MPs will be told there's a choice. Either support the Prime Minister's deal and have a 3-month delay to Brexit to get it passed, or reject the deal and face a much longer extension beyond June to find another solution. That choice is focusing the minds of those who previously rejected the Prime Minister's deal.
There's a gun to my head at this point, and I think voters will appreciate that increasingly we're getting a very, very, very limited range of options left if we want to actually honour the manifesto commitment to leave at all. So it's now effectively a bad Brexit deal or no Brexit, which is absolutely ghastly. It's not what we should have done. Parliament tonight has made a colossal mistake.
And surely you would prefer a bad Brexit deal than no Brexit?
In the final analysis, probably yes.
No to no deal! No to no deal!
So tonight, they got the answer they wanted. Tomorrow, we find out what Parliament asks for next. Paul Brand, ITV News, Westminster.
So tonight's votes do bring MPs a step closer to voting to delay Brexit. But if and when they do that tomorrow, the countries of the European Union, of course, have to agree to any extension to Article 50. We've talked about this often with James this week, and he is in Strasbourg tonight. James, what's been the official reaction to what we've seen here tonight?
Well, it's one of those days over here when people are liable to grab you at any moment, any British journalist, and say, what on earth is going on, as if we have any better idea. They were expecting some sort of no-deal resolution which would take no deal off the table. They certainly weren't expecting to have Mrs May ordering her own MPs to vote against her own motion and then to lose. But it does just confirm their view that every vote out of Westminster is a vote for what they're against, not what they're for. And that was reflected in their statement tonight, where they said there are only two ways in which to leave the EU: with a deal or without a deal. To take no deal off the table, it's not enough to vote against no deal. You have to agree to a deal. And that just reflects the legal position, that there's either going to be a deal or there's going to be an extension, or we leave on March the 29th, the one possible exception being a revocation of Article 50, but they see no sign of that happening.
OK, James, well, I mean, Theresa May, as you will have heard, was pretty clear tonight that if MPs don't vote for a deal, she's going to ask for a long delay. Is she going to get it, and will it come with any conditions?
Well, very possibly. It's going to depend what happens next week. If she's managed to get the deal through somehow, then the short technical extension she'll ask for till June the 30th. That date is significant because in early July, the new European Parliament without British MEPs will meet, and legally we have to be out by then. However, if there's still no deal by the time she gets to the summit next Thursday, she'll be asking for a longer extension, a year, maybe more. Views are mixed on that. Some actually quite like that idea, but the French in particular, not them alone, but they, in order to agree to that, would want to see a major change in the dynamic. A new government, a new election, a new referendum, something. They're not prepared just carry on as we are for another year.
OK, James, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's just go on now for his take on Brexit to Robert Peston, who is, of course, preparing for his show tonight. Robert, well, you know, what do we say? Another extraordinary night here. Let's be honest. If Theresa May brings this back for another vote next week, her deal, which we assume she will, Brexiteers are going to be under enormous pressure to buckle and vote for it, aren't they? Do you think there's any chance she'll win that vote third time around?
There is a smallish chance. Certainly, I think quite a lot of the people who voted, some of the Tory Brexiters who voted against her yesterday, will, I think, come on board next week because they are now deeply fearful that if she doesn't get her deal through, we are in for potentially very long delay before we leave the European Union, and possibly we may not leave the European Union at all. But you should remember that there is a hardcore of Brexiters, some of whom may take the view, frankly, they're prepared to take their chances in another referendum rather than vote for a deal, Theresa May's deal, that they detest. And then, of course, there are a bunch of Tories who hate the deal for other reasons. They are the Remainer Tories, people like Sam Guimar, who's on my show tonight, Jo Johnson. So I think, you know, frankly, even if a lot of Tory Brexiters are in a state of panic next week, there's no guarantee she wins a third vote on her deal.
OK, well, let's just suppose for a moment she doesn't and she goes for that long extension. I know this is an incredibly open question and we've been asking a lot of those, but what happens in a year or 2 years, in your view, after that?
Look, the reality is that I think it is right now impossible to make predictions of, you know, what would happen were we into a year's delay or a 21-month delay. There are proposals out there, Gordon Brown, some members of the Labour Party, very keen for there to be so-called citizens' juries to sort of work out what kind of Brexit the UK would really want, and then put that to the people in a referendum. But actually, to be frank, right now, tonight, the big issue is, can Theresa May's government survive? I am being bombarded with messages from Tory MPs saying the fact that she hasn't sacked those cabinet ministers who defied her tonight in that vital vote. And just to remind you, I've got one of those cabinet ministers, Greg Clark, the Brexit secretary, coming on the show tonight, explaining why he defied the Prime Minister, why he doesn't believe that, you know, it was sensible for him to resign, why the Prime Minister didn't sack him. Now, in response to that, very briefly, you know, a senior Tory says, collective responsibility now gone. If ministers can abstain on a three-line whip, it says here in my text, it's over for the Tory party. End of.